I'm having a little bit of a bummer weekend. It's not very fun to stay home from church and not see all of you guys in the park, but I had a wonderful weekend last weekend. Um, it was my birthday last weekend, and we had a really great time of celebration. My daughter Rose drove down for the weekend from Berkeley to surprise me, which I was definitely completely surprised and so excited. And I got to babysit my grandson Forrest all day. He usually goes to preschool with his mom Hannah, who is a preschool teacher, but she had actually asked me ahead of time, would I like to have Forrest in my house for the day instead of him going to preschool that day, which might seem like a little bit of a strange gift. Like, hey, would you like to babysit all day for your birthday? But my daughter-in-law knows me, and she knows how to make me happy. And she knows that's the best birthday present that she could give me. And then my kids all took me out to dinner, and we had a wonderful dinner out at a local Indian restaurant that we hadn't been to before, because my kids all know that Indian is probably my favorite category of food ever. Except that, as our kids pointed out when we got there, they don't have chocolate dessert. And that definitely is a rough point for me. But after dinner, it turned out that they had brought along a chocolate cheesecake, a Godiva chocolate cheesecake from the Cheesecake Factory, because they know that that's my favorite. And so we had chocolate after all. We had Indian food and chocolate cheesecake. It feels so good when someone you love really knows you. And when they give you things that they know that you love because they love you. And just to have my kids all under one roof, all eating my favorite foods together was so fun. And they gave me funny cards. I got one card with that looked like a license plate and just says, "I'm old" on it. And I got another one that says, "You're not another year older. And then when you open up, there's a button inside and it says, "You're another year sexier." So I thought that was pretty funny. I took the button off and I put it on. And Josh and Britton were high-fiving each other, so excited, saying, "She did it. She put it on. She put it on." It's funny because not everybody loves funny cards, but I do. And my kids know that I love funny cards. And a lot of people would laugh at the funny cards, but they would never actually just take the button off and wear it for the rest of the dinner. But again, my kids know me. And because they know me, they hoped that I would take the button and put it on and wear it for the rest of dinner. And they were so happy when I did the thing that they thought I would do, because they want to know me. And this means that they've known me rightly. So it's just a little moment of silliness, but it's a little moment of silliness that means that they have rightly known me. And that makes them happy, and it makes me happy. All of us love that feeling of being truly known. At the end of the day, I don't really care about the food that we had. And the cards, they eventually get thrown away. But being known by my family, being loved and being delighted in, being wanted the way that we are. When people know how to make you smile and they love to make you smile, it's like the best feeling, isn't it? Sometimes it's when someone picks up a small gift, a food item, a clothing item, a little trinket, just because they know you'll like it. Or maybe they share a personal experience with you. Might even be a really painful personal experience, but they share it with you because they knew that you would understand and that you would care. Or they tell you a joke that makes you laugh, and they say, "I knew that one would make you laugh," right? These moments of being known, they're really special to us. Whether they're serious ones or just lighthearted ones. I wanted to start off this morning with a discussion question. So we're going to break up into small groups, as we've been doing most Sundays. And just here's a simple discussion question for all of us. Who's someone in your life who really gets you? Can you think of an example of something that they did or said that made you feel known? And what's it like for you to be with this person? So we're going to put those questions up on the screen. They're also available in the Zoom notes that are available online on the website. By the way, if you are in the park, there's no paper bulletin, because I usually bring the paper bulletins and I'm not there. And I didn't plan not to be there far enough advance to be able to send you the paper bulletins, but you can access those, the notes just right on your phone. So if you go to the New Coast website and you go to Sunday messages and you go to today, you actually can access the notes online, even from your phone. So you can do that if you are joining on Zoom or in person. So once again, our discussion questions are: who's someone in your life who really gets you? And can you think of an example of something they did or said that made you feel known? What's it like for you to be around this person? So we're going to take just 5 minutes in small groups. And then, so get with maybe 3, maybe 4 people who are nearby and share your answers to this question. And we'll be back in 5 minutes. Well, that was fun hearing everybody's stories. We're starting a new series. We started last week going through the Gospel of John. And we're calling this new series, The Word Became Flesh. And this week, we're going to talk about longing to be known. So if you're in the park, make sure to come on back to our big group. And then last week, we talked about John the Baptist pointing out Jesus, letting people know that Jesus is the one that the world has been longing for. We saw an example of Peter being invited by Andrew to come and meet Jesus. And then Jesus spoke to him about who he was and about his destiny and said, your name is Simon, but you're going to be called Peter, which means the rock. And we talked about how Jesus speaks to us when he calls us in unique and special ways that meet the longings of our own hearts. And we handed out some cards that we can use to invite people to church. And we talked about doing just like John the Baptist and Andrew, and just letting people know where they can find Jesus if they'd like to meet him for themselves, and inviting them to come and join us. I'm going to have to take a drink here. And today we're going to talk about another invitation to come and hang out with Jesus that also results in an encounter in which Jesus speaks to the person. Jesus shows a man named Nathaniel that he knows him, that he sees him, and that he gets him. And this leads Nathaniel to recognize Jesus as the one that he's been looking for and to begin to follow him. So the main point this morning, we're just going to give right off the bat. The main point this morning is that each of us longs to be truly known and truly loved. And when we invite other people to come to church with us, we're giving them the opportunity to encounter Jesus and to experience being truly known and truly loved. So with that in mind, I'm going to take a minute to pray, and we're going to look at our passage for today. And Holy Spirit, we welcome your presence. Would you come and be with us right now? We love you, Lord, and we need you. Would you lead us and guide us, and would you speak to us through your scriptures? And would you cause us to be a church that continually invites our friends to come and to encounter you? And we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. So today we're going to be in John chapter 1. We're going to pick up in verse 43, and we're going to go through verse 51. And then next week, actually, we're going to go back to the beginning of John and start with verse 1. And we're just going to walk through this passage. So it begins the next day. This is the next day after the encounter with Peter. Jesus decided to leave for Galilee. Finding Philip, he said to him, "Follow me." Philip, like Andrew and Peter, was from the town of Bethsaida. Philip found Nathanael and told him, "We have found the one Moses wrote about in the law, and about whom the prophets also wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." So once again, we found the one that we have all been waiting for. And then here is Nathanael's response. He says, "Nazareth? Can anything good come from there?" Now, this is a really funny comment. Really? The Messiah is from Nazareth? And Nazareth is this town that's not mentioned in the Old Testament. There's nothing grand or exciting about Nazareth. And so here's Nathaniel thinking, why on earth would God send the Messiah to a little podunk town like Nazareth? And it's kind of a funny reaction, but on the other hand, it's also a very real reaction. I mean, it makes me think about how, because our kids ran cross country in high school, we kept ending up spending every single Thanksgiving weekend in Fresno, because the cross country, the state cross country meet would be in Fresno every year. And if our kids qualified for it, we would be going on the Friday after Thanksgiving for a cross country meet in Fresno. And so this was a lot. We would go to Los Angeles for Thanksgiving and then leave and then drive up to Fresno later in the day on Thanksgiving Day and be there for the day afterward every single year that Rose was in high school, and Josh, and one year that Josh was in high school. And I remember just thinking, like, oh my goodness, we're really we could be going to a fun, exciting destination where something cool is happening. The first year that we stayed there, I picked out a hotel trying to find a good place for us to stay, and it was horrible. We just hated it. And I had this really bad attitude. Like, I can't believe we're going to spend Thanksgiving. I'm so excited for this meet, but I can't believe we're going to spend Thanksgiving in Fresno again. So no offense to anyone who might be from there or actually really loves that city. I'm not saying it's actually a terrible city. I'm just saying that was my attitude, that we're going to this, it seemed like there was nothing there and nothing going on except for the meet. And that was my attitude about going there for the long weekend every year. And and all of us, have these kind of thoughts. So Nathaniel is in a lot of ways just like us and just like other people that we know. And we all have things that turn us off right away. And it's actually often hard for us to invite our friends to church because we're afraid that they're going to experience something that happens in church as offensive. Or if it's not offensive, just as a turnoff, right? And we're afraid maybe our friends are already turned off from church because of something that they didn't like. So Nathaniel here he's immediately turned off because he doesn't like Nazareth, and he doesn't really think that Nazareth is the kind of place that he expects the Messiah to come from. I wanted to take a minute just to think about, what are the things that we imagine might turn our friends off. So if we're going to be like Philip and we're going to invite a friend, what are some of the things that we imagine might turn people just off of church? And now I haven't done something like this when I wasn't physically present in the park before, but we're going to try to do it anyway. So if people could just shout out some things that might turn people off about church, and if we can work it out so that people on Zoom can speak out and be heard in the park, and also so that we could hear people in the park, maybe someone can repeat it. But what are some of the things that turn people off about church? Let's just try to speak some of those things out.
I don't get, oh, there we go. Okay. Yeah. So I think and sometimes people could be seeking, like a spiritual seeker, seeking God, but not necessarily seeking the additional, like what might feel like pressure from strangers. I think I like people, and so I like when a church is very welcoming. And people, if I were to visit a church, I would appreciate people coming and saying hi to me. But I have friends who I know are kind of seeking, but they are less personable, and they would like to just sort of come and have a message, and like a church who is trying to do all the right things and be welcoming and friendly might be a turnoff to them. They'd be better suited to go to like a mega church and like slip into the back row or something like that. So yeah, just the like more personal interaction than they might be looking for. Yeah.
I'd be afraid that I would bring my friends and no one would talk to them. And so they would feel awkward that no one is talking to them. And like they went to this club and it's so exclusive, or, and people aren't being inclusive.
Okay. So Rob is saying, giving up making the time commitment to, giving up that, the extra time that you might have had on a Sunday morning, to spend that at church instead. Okay. Yeah, so Kelly's saying like, the feeling the pressure to give up, to give financially also. Do you, are you thinking more in terms of like the people in the church would have an expectation of some outward sign from the visitor, or that maybe the visitor would feel like, is something not working in me that is working in them? Or so some pressure to somehow outwardly affirm that they are experiencing it too. Yeah. Okay.
I'd be worried about the sermon being something that really hurts their feelings or brings up something of deep disagreement for them.
Okay, so Frank is saying, that I guess the idea is that most churches, they might have some sort of bent in terms of societal views or cultural things, and that people might feel they might either be concerned that they're not going to align with the kind of values or the views that church has, whether politically or socially or something like that, or the discomfort if they do, if they don't find themselves in agreement. Is that right, Frank? Okay. So do you think that that's a block for us to invite people, or do you think that's a block where people who might become, they might not, they might be turned off being unsure of? Okay. So Terry's saying people maybe might be turned off by the uncertainty of whether the church is going to meet their expectations, like, or if they're used to high church and then they showed up in the park with us, it might not feel like church. Yeah. I think we have to just like trust that God is gonna move. And what? Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to bring us back to, if you can go ahead and turn your attention back to me on your screen if you are in the park. These are all things that on the one hand, we want to be super aware of, right? We want to be aware of what our friends and family members and acquaintances that we might invite are going to be experiencing. And we want to be considerate of those things. And we want the people that we invite to come and visit with us to have a good experience. On the other hand, we find ourselves sometimes just wanting everything to be perfect before we could even begin to invite someone. And then what ends up happening is that we never get around to inviting them. And the reality is that church is never going to be perfect, that we're always going to have flaws. And it's interesting how we even talked about some people, will be put off by people trying to talk to them. And some people will be, feeling really uncomfortable because no one talked to them. So we're not going to be able to be perfect. But an important thing that we notice in this passage is that Philip doesn't make excuses. He doesn't seem to feel responsible to justify Jesus' unimpressive background or defend Nazareth as a perfectly good town with respectable people where the Messiah might be from. All Philip actually says is, come and see. In the end, people don't decide to follow Jesus because they came to church and nothing was weird. They don't decide to follow Jesus because they hung out and they found his followers to be completely inoffensive in every way. Instead, you read in the New Testament that people are offended by Jesus constantly, left and right. Jesus is offending everyone. And in the end, most people aren't drawn to a community because the people there seem perfect. But people are typically drawn to a community where people take an interest in them, where people ask them about themselves, where people seem actually interested in them. Because most of us, we want to be known. And not only known, but we want to be loved in that place of knowing. Makes me think of the old TV show Cheers. I actually never watched this show, but I just hear people reference the theme song to it. Sometimes you want to be where everybody knows your name and they're always glad you came. And Jesus immediately shows Nathanael that he's known and appreciated for who he is. We read in the scripture, when Jesus saw Nathanael approaching, he said to him, "Here truly is an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." Can we get that up on the screen? When Jesus saw Nathanael approaching, he said to him, "Here truly is an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." It seems like just as strange a thing to say as what Jesus said to Peter that we read last week. You're going to have a new name that means rock. You know what we say when we're alone with someone we're really close to, someone that we have intimate relationship with, often is something that would seem strange to other people. And Jesus isn't talking to us. He's talking to Nathanael, and he's showing him that he gets him. He's showing him that he's the one that Nathanael's been longing for. And he says of Nathanael, here's a guy who's a straight shooter. He's honest and straightforward. And we don't know why this might have been meaningful to hear at that moment, but it makes me think about that feeling that's the opposite of being known and loved, that feeling of being misunderstood. It feels really awful, especially when someone is thinking poorly of you because of it. One of my strongest memories of being misunderstood actually comes from middle school. I'd had an argument with my mom, and I was mad and upset. And I went outside in the front yard, and there was a tree in my front yard that I used to love to climb in. And so I climbed up the tree in my front yard and just was like, I'm just going to hang out up here and I'm not going to come down. Well, I'm hanging out in this tree thinking I'm not going to come down. And then my mom came outside looking for me, and she didn't see me. And I was really surprised to find out that she didn't see me up there in the tree. And so I just stayed up there and didn't tell her where I was. And then a little while later, she went back in the house and she came out again. And I'm still kind of up there sulking. I'm like, I'm not going to say anything. And then she went back in. And the next time she came out, she looked really worried. And she started talking to one of the neighbors. You know, I don't know where Mimi, that's my childhood nickname, I don't know where Mimi is. You know, she was upset. She went outside and I don't see her. I don't know where she went. It's starting to get dark. And then I started to feel bad. Like, oh no, I didn't mean to scare her. I just was mad, right? And so they're standing out there talking. I'm thinking, well, as soon as they go back in, I'm going to get down and I'm going to come in so that they won't worry about me. But they didn't go back in. They stayed outside. And a little while later, they started talking to more neighbors. As neighbors were coming home from work, they were talking to the neighbors. And pretty soon, my entire neighborhood is talking about the fact that I'm missing. And they've started looking for me with a flashlight in the bushes. And I'm starting to feel really, really embarrassed and really, really uncomfortable. And I desperately, all I want to do is get down out of my tree and come, you know, back inside and tell my mom that I'm home and I'm okay. But the last thing in the world that I'm going to do now is climb down out of the tree while all the neighbors are standing there talking about me, because it's just way too embarrassing. So I'm waiting and waiting and waiting for them to all go away so that I can climb down and come back in the house. And then finally, all the neighbors dispersed and started walking around the neighborhood looking for me. And only my mom was left. And I thought, go away, Mom. You know, just go in the house for 1 minute and I will come down and I will come home. And I looked and she started to cry. And I thought, well, at least it's just her. At least no one else is there. Maybe I can come down right now while one of the neighbors is looking and I'll tell my mom that I'm okay. Well, right when I was thinking that, my mom looked up to the sky and she saw me. And as you can imagine, she was so angry. And I went inside in the house and she had to tell all the neighbors what had happened. But the part where I felt misunderstood is when my dad came home, you know, and my dad also was, you know, so upset that I had done this to them and to our neighbors too. But the part that was so hard, as my dad kept saying, I just don't understand. I don't understand why you would do this to your mom. Why would you want to hurt your mom like that? Why would you want to scare your mom like that? And that was the really hard part, because I kept trying to explain to him, I never meant to hurt mom. I never meant for her to be afraid. I only felt embarrassed because all of the people were looking for me, and I didn't want to show them that I had been up here all this time. And I was just waiting for them to leave because I was ashamed. I never meant for her to be afraid that I wasn't okay. But I couldn't make my dad understand my motives. And it seemed like he just believed that I had done this out of meanness. And that just was heartbreaking. It was so painful to have my dad think that I would want to cause this kind of pain. When you're telling the truth and someone doesn't believe you, it feels terrible, doesn't it? I was willing to own that I had been in the wrong. That part was easy. I'm so sorry for what I've done. But having the motives misunderstood was so hard. It hurts so much, when we try to explain our motives or try to explain something that's in our hearts and someone doesn't believe or doesn't understand, especially when it's a bad thing. Have you ever been in a situation like that? Where someone thought you did something that you didn't do, or had a motive you didn't have and they didn't believe you? And I don't know if something like this ever happened to Nathaniel or not, but I'm imagining that regardless of whether or not he's ever been in a situation like that, if you're a really deeply honest person, this would be something that you would want other people to know about you. Like, for someone who knows you, you would want them to know that at the bottom of their heart. This is one thing that I know to be true of my friend so-and-so. Not just because you want them to think well of you, but because you want them to know the things that are in your heart, to understand who you are, and to know what values are important to you. And Jesus is showing that he sees Nathaniel and he knows him and he values him for who he is. And Nathaniel's next question reflects this. He says to Jesus, "How do you know me?" And Jesus' answer shows even more intimate knowledge. Jesus answered, "I saw you while you were still under the fig tree before Philip called you." So on the one hand, this is a demonstration of knowledge and power, right? It shows that Jesus really is the Son of God. I saw you when I was here and you were there. So it shows divine power and a special relationship with the Father. But it's also so much more than that. It's personal. I took time to look for you in a world full of people. I took time to look at you where you were sitting and to think about you and to notice what you were like. Not just I get you either, but I loved you and I wanted to get you. And this is when Nathaniel realizes that Jesus is the answer, that he's the one that the world has been longing for, that he's the one that he himself has been longing for. And we read, then Nathaniel declared, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." In other words, you are the Messiah, the one who will meet the longings of the whole earth. When we talked last week about inviting friends to church, and that it's not our job to get them to follow Jesus. It's just our job to give them the opportunity to meet him, to have an encounter with the Son of God. And this is the experience that Nathaniel has. And it's so often what happens to people when they encounter Jesus. It's the sort of thing that we hope our friends will experience when they come. If Nathaniel had gone with Philip to meet Jesus and nothing interesting had happened, if Jesus had simply been perfectly inoffensive, if there had been a big crowd and it was safe to sit in the back and not talk to anyone, and if there had been no opportunity for intimate connection with Jesus, he probably would never have bothered to come back. Yes, maybe he wouldn't have been offended, but would he have any reason to ever come back? But it's because Jesus took a personal interest in him, spoke directly to him in a way that did expose him, in a way that he felt known, understood, and valued. It was because of this that he realized that Jesus was the one that he was looking for. You know, I've talked a lot about my own first experience coming to Coast. I was pretty skeptical of all things religion. I didn't really have any specific negative ideas about church. I just had never really been there. I was raised atheist, and I thought that believing in the existence of God was about as stupid as thinking that the Harry Potter series is a true story. I mean, just Christianity seemed like something that was utterly and completely absurd. Like talking to an adult who thinks they're a mermaid. Christians were right in there with me. For me, Christians were right in there with people who say that they've been abducted by aliens. So my perspective was kind of like Nathaniel's, like a church? Has anything good ever come from there? But then I got prayer after the service, and a man that I had never met named a specific area of deep, deep pain in my life, a really important broken relationship in my life, and said that God knew about it and was sorry that this had happened and that things are not supposed to be like that. And I wasn't convinced yet, even then, that God was real. I thought perhaps this was a lucky guess. But at the same time, I realized that if God was real, then God actually knew me, and knew me in the deepest, most deeply hurt places of my heart, and actually cared about me. And I found myself thinking, well, if Jesus could be real, then he definitely is the answer to everything that I have been looking for and longing for in my life. And so I kept coming back and coming back until I believed it for myself. I want to send us to a second time of small group discussion. So the questions for this discussion are, have you had an experience where Jesus showed you he truly knows you and truly loves you? And if so, what happened? If not, would you like to have an experience like this? So once again, have you had an experience where Jesus showed you he truly knows you and loves you? And if so, what happened? If not, would you like to have an experience like this? So we're going to take 10 minutes in small groups. So if you're in the park, go ahead and find, again, 3 or 4 other people to talk with. And then if you're on Zoom, Marianne's going to send us into groups from there. Those of us on Zoom are already back. So often what happens to people when they encounter Jesus is that Jesus speaks to them about the inner things of their hearts and shows them that he's the answer to the things that they've been longing for. And sometimes this happens the very first time someone comes to church. Other times it happens, later, or it happens over a period of time. But either way, eventually it takes root and it grows into a powerful relationship. And finishing out our passage, we read, Jesus said, "You believe because I told you I saw you under the fig tree. You will see greater things than that." He then added, "Very truly, I tell you, you will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man." In other words, just wait. This thing is going to grow. And it's going to be even better than you think. You're going to be part of something that's truly wonderful. Last week we gave out these invitation cards, a little business card size card in a sleeve that fits about 4 little plastic sleeve. I want to encourage us to be people to come to join us on Sunday and giving them a chance to encounter Jesus. Please don't worry about whether or not it will be the perfect experience that day. Let's just give people a low pressure opportunity to come and check out what we're doing, to come to where we're going to be hanging out with Jesus and have a chance to meet him for themselves. If you didn't get the little cards last week in the park, you should have received some in the mail. There's also more at the welcome table you can pick up. And I'm sure if for any reason you did not receive any in the mail, you could email Rob and he can send some to you. But we're going to end right now by just having a final song together of worship and just inviting Jesus to come and to meet us. I want to take a minute to ask you, is there anybody here who you feel like you need Jesus to speak to you today? You really, really need to know today that you are known and that you are loved. And if that's you and you're in the park right now, I just want to encourage you to raise your hand right now. I want to invite people on the prayer team to come around and pray for anyone at the